Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Jamie Forrest. I'm representing today Purpose Life Sciences. Dr. Edward Mills is the principal investigator of the Together trial, along with Gilmar Reis from Brazil. And I'm here to represent the Together trial. Thank you very much to the investigators of this meeting for inviting me here. I also have a couple colleagues here in the audience and one online who will be speaking to the this afternoon session on statistics. So please reserve your statistical methodological questions to my expert colleague. And I'm here more to talk to you about the operational aspects of running the trial overall, and give you a sense of what we have accomplished in the last several years of the Together trial, starting going back as far as June of 2020. So this is a fairly old slide, but it still very much illustrates the point that I think we were trying to make all in the beginning, in that we had a bit of a problem when the pandemic came around. That was that there was a flurry of trials all being registered online. It was at that time, actually, that my colleagues Ed and I, among others, created a platform, technological platform. I hate to use the word platform sometimes in this meeting, technological platform in which we could track the trials registered on ct.gov. And we were seeing a whole lot of trials being registered, of course, for the indication of COVID. But they were all very, very small, many underpowered, perhaps, and many probably that would never read out. In fact, more than half at that time were under even 100 patients. And so it presents with a couple of problems. One being that data could be very useful if they're all quite pulled together, but we know individual trials are very expensive. It's quite inefficient to set up an entire clinical trial, have it run out, get results that are only small, that can only ever be actually used meaningfully in clinical evidence once they're pulled together with a number of different trials similar to it. Or we could think more about adaptive platform designs, where it's more efficient to run platform designs, cheaper costs to evaluate different interventions, and we get results quicker. So that sort of is the origin story of the Together trial, and thinking about that, and led us to, I'm really having some technological issues here. I'm pressing the clicker towards you. If I go like that, there we go, perfect. Okay, things are working. There's my colleague, Dr. Sprague. I'm going to give her all of the really hard questions, just so you know. Okay, so general overview then of the Together trial. It was initiated in June. We started in June of 2020, so quite early in the pandemic. We have evaluated a number of interventions now to date that I'll discuss going forward here. And there's ethics approval for the study from McMaster University, as well as the National Research Ethics Committee of Brazil, called CONEP. And the protocol for the paper and the SAP together are published in the Gates Journal, as well as can be found on the Together trial website. So the primary outcome for the Together trial is hospitalization at 28 days. And there's a bit of a caveat here in the beginning, or that first bullet point there about emergency room visitation. So early on in the pandemic, there was, of course, a flurry of primary care activities to accommodate the pandemic, one of which in Brazil were field hospitals, much similar to a number of places around the world. These field hospitals were, in every sense, hospitalized staffed rooms that had all of the equipment typical of an inpatient hospital center, but they weren't really hospitalized settings, and so we call them emergency care settings. So visitations at an emergency room hospital for greater than 6 hours we defined as somewhat similar to hospitalization. That would then be removed once the pandemic progressed and hospitalization became the only primary outcome of Together. That's at 28 days. A number of secondary outcomes are also evaluated here that included symptomology, as well as viral clearance and viral load. So the Inclusion criteria of the Together trial is essentially adult patients over the age of 18 with a diagnosis by rapid test of SARS-CoV-2 within 7 days of treatment onset, and with one other condition that made them at risk for a high risk for complications from COVID-19. And that included a long list of obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer, other comorbidities that put them at high risk. The key exclusion criteria were basically taking any drugs that were contraindicated with any of the interventions, or having any condition that might be contraindicated as well with any of the medications. So data collection occurred after at several time points post randomization. Collection was primarily occurred at the site level, but also included community level visits, as well as visits that were conducted by a trained researcher on WhatsApp to collect various demographic information that may have changed throughout the study. There was also a post 28-day assessment too at 60 days that gave long-term follow-up. And then all SAEs were recorded, of course, as per the regulatory authority. And the information was captured on an EDC called IBM eClinical. And we partnered with a group called MMS that helped us with electronic data capture throughout the study. I'll just take a minute to talk briefly about study monitoring. So this was a paper-based study that was collected in the community or at the site level by trained researchers and investigators. That information from the paper base was then inputted by these hardworking researchers here into the EDC. There were a number of system level queries that were generated automatically within the EDC itself. They were entered, and then our team at McMaster University, led by Dr. Sprague here, would then review all of those queries. They would be sent back to the research team in Brazil, where they would resolve those queries, and that cycle continued throughout the entire process. There was also source data verification that occurred at the site level in Brazil as well, that was conducted by monitors employed by the research team in Brazil. There were a couple high-level monitoring visits as well by the investigators from Canada that visited Brazil, but that was not to review source data verification. That was just for various procedural checks. So the study setting for Together was in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil, located here. The capital of that state is called Belo Horizonte, and that is the site of Card Research, the partner, the conducting partner in Brazil. The study setting included the clinic sites were from 22 neighboring clinics within the state of Minas Gerais that were, some were actually quite far from the capital. And then an effort was made to build partnerships with the policymakers from those sub-regions, that we created MOUs between the study and the local public health authorities that allowed for participation of the study in the community setting. So in some cases, actually, we had community healthcare workers that would travel into the very high risk favela areas, that would be accompanied by guards of the favela themselves. And in often cases, it was only healthcare workers that would be permitted in there. They were their own security very much protected the healthcare worker. And they were able to draw out from those communities, those who were eligible for the study, and then follow up with them through WhatsApp. So yeah, that's a lot of the community-based approach that I was just speaking about, involved really creating high-level MOUs with various public health authorities within the state of Minas Gerais, that was able to penetrate deep into communities, get a strong and diverse samples representation from those communities, and allowed us, I think, to be very efficient at recruiting as many patients as we did in Together. think this shows you recruitment in the Together trial over time, and the stacked bar graph shows you the various interventions that were evaluated during each time period from June 2020 all the way to July of 2022. There was one other slide here, but I don't think it's come up, but I wanted to show you the various interventions over time, and that shows the adaptive nature of the design that allows for the dropping and adding of different arms. I'm happy to show someone that slide offline after this, or you can visit the website, the Together Trial website, and you can also see the same illustration that shows the dropping and adding of arms. I'll present on the study findings from most of these treatment interventions. The only one that I'll briefly touch about that I'm not going to speak about is doxazosin. It was the only intervention evaluated in the trial that was stopped for safety issues. There was a number of syncopal episodes related to use of that drug, and the Data Safety Monitoring Board stopped the use of that drug. So we were not able to get any meaningful results other than the safety results, any meaningful efficacy results, let's say. And then, but the others, I do have a little bit of study findings, brief study finding overviews to present. And they're all published as well, and I'll reference those publications if you want to dig in further. So the Together trial has received quite a bit of recognition since its time in both mainstream media as well as scientific publications, particularly around the hype around hydroxychloroquine. At first, we received quite a lot of attention. And then with the hype around ivermectin, I believe that our publication in the New England Journal on ivermectin may have been a bit of the nail in the coffin that finally got mainstream media kind of stopped talking about ivermectin, or at least totally switching sides to the there is no treatment effect here. And so it was nice to get that publicity. So this was the first evaluations were on hydroxychloroquine and on lopinavir, ritonavir, Kaletra, and there we showed no effect with either of those two drugs. The next evaluation was metformin. We showed no effect with metformin. I know that there have been some other trials that have shown modest effect sizes with metformin. And so we don't claim that this is necessarily the definitive truth of metformin for the treatment of COVID-19. We have a new trial, a new master protocol that we're implementing called the REVIVE trial that Dr. Chung actually briefly mentioned. And we've started recruiting patients into that trial, into placebo and metformin arms in Brazil. I'll touch on that very briefly at the end. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course everyone's favorite drug, ivermectin. We showed no effect there. The drug that we did find an effect with that did receive quite a bit of attention, and I think is we're talking a little bit about here, is fluvoxamine. It is an SSRI. We used 100 milligrams twice daily for 14 days. And there was an effect that we did see here with hospitalizations and no differences in SAEs or AEs in general. And then the other drug that we did see an effect size with was interferon lambda. This is a pegylated subcutaneous injection that was given once within 48 hours of diagnosis. And the matched placebo for this was saline subcutaneous injection. I'm going to talk about the placebos in the Together trial coming up, because I think that there's something interesting to talk about here. And then the last evaluation that we've published on from Together is a combination arm of fluvoxamine with inhaled budesonide, in which we did show an effect that was of similar size effect to fluvoxamine alone. So beyond just the efficacy and safety research that we're doing in the trial platform itself, we have built an extensive program surrounding the platform trial itself. And I think that's one of the really interesting things that perhaps we'll talk about throughout this meeting, in that we spoke about how the infrastructure is very difficult to fund. But if you can find funding for that infrastructure that builds the trial platform itself, and then additional funding for the individual evaluations within that platform, that infrastructure can actually build quite an extensively large research program. And it's through that we've done things like cost effectiveness modeling. We have done qualitative work as well on the different domains that have perhaps made successes and challenges within the platform design itself. And we've written commentaries as well that have advanced this idea of how COVID-19 has maybe changed some of this, the paradigm shift that we're seeing in this room right now on the use of platform adaptive trials. So I wanted to talk about a bit placebos, and I hope that this is something that we are going to have a little bit of a discussion about over the next day and a half here. Placebos are an interesting component, a unique component in some ways of platform adaptive trials. And I'm going to show you a little bit about a study that we have conducted that is yet to be published, but submitted currently for peer review, in which we ask the question, do matched placebos really matter? Does it matter that you identically match and blind in every way possible the type of placebo in a platform design? Because that can actually make for a very challenging type of a design of a study. So in the Together trial, placebos were matched based on the number of days of the corresponding active intervention arm. Let me clarify. So if there were two intervention arms and one placebo arm at a given time X in the design, and one of those intervention arms had a 10-day course, and the other intervention had a 14-day course, then half of the individuals in the placebo would be randomized to a 14-day placebo, half would be randomized to a 10-day placebo. The placebo was not matched by color, shape, and size. It was a generic looking white tablet that did not necessarily match the shape, size, color of the intervention. So they were only matched on days, okay? And then we asked the question, does it matter really that they were even matched on days? The only actually placebo that was different than the white standard tablet was there was a matched placebo for interferon lambda, which was a subcutaneous saline injection. So we looked at, for each study within the Together platform, we looked at whether there were differences within the study itself between the directly matched placebo and the non-matched placebo. And then we looked across all the studies within the Together platform as well. And we found there are no differences at all on the outcomes, on the primary outcome, or actually on any of the secondary outcomes at all. I think leading to the conclusion that at least matching on days is not necessarily important. We can't really make that conclusion around shape, size, color, because we did not have matched placebos on that. But I think that this is really important information for as you design platform trials going forward, to know that at least in Together, we did not find any differences in the different types of placebos. I'm going to spend just a minute now talking about how, again, we used research infrastructure and this idea of if we can have great funding for this infrastructure itself, it can build so much more than just the platform itself. And a lot of, in addition to an extensive research program that this infrastructure funding has helped us achieve, is global partnerships and capacity development around advanced clinical trial methods with our global partners. So we started this project in Brazil, but we initially conceptualized a larger network in South Africa, Pakistan, Rwanda, Kenya, and Brazil. And we had an initial meeting of investigators from all those places. A lot of various different organizations that we had in our our global network. Here's an idea of what that global network looks like. We're in various stages of understanding of advanced clinical methods, not just of themselves and their research groups, but also of their regulators, of their own country regulators had various understanding of what that meant and the unique ethical issues associated with platform adaptive designs. So we held this meeting. We then branched off into each of these groups with these different unique challenges. We worked with them to help present the master protocol adapted to their region to their regulator and work through regulatory issues with them. We held GCP training implementation, and we essentially helped in many ways set up the site ready for recruitment with using this master protocol as an example. And I can tell you we were variously successful in in each of the different places that we worked. And you know, there was a lot accomplished, even if there was not a single patient recruited. And I think that that's one of the things we need to think about in doing these, is that a measure of success isn't necessarily first patient in. Sometimes the measure of success is they're ready now for the next platform trial that comes up. And in fact, these are all sites that are now onboarded for the Revive protocol. And we will be, as we expand that long COVID protocol out, beyond just Brazil and Pakistan, who have approved the study so far, we will be including these other countries as well, who we've invested a significant amount of resources in bringing them and their regulators up to speed on on the operational and methodological issues of APTs. So just wanted to briefly touch on the Revive long COVID protocol. I won't talk about it too much because I was asked to just talk about together. And we are in the early stages. It is approved and recruited in Brazil. It is sort of approved, one stage approval finished in Pakistan, and recruitment we expect to happen in the next month or so there. But they're two kind of different protocols under one master protocol, and I'll talk about that here. So there's a top core protocol, and I'm thankful to have Dr. Sprague here because she's led the protocol development for this. So she will help answer any questions if there are. But there's two sub protocols for this core protocol: an adolescent and an adult protocol. It's the adult protocol that has approval in Brazil and has started recruitment into metformin and placebo, awaiting approval for an amendment on fluvoxamine. In Pakistan, it's an adolescent-specific protocol, but for both, the outcome is a fatigue score. So I want to thank the various institutional partners we've had over the many years of participating in Together. And I thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take questions on the Together trial.